She banged on my door like it was on fire. That's how it started. Saturday morning, still fog over the lake, and this woman in a floral blazer was yelling outside my porch. I just bought the old Lakehouse, 100 years of cracked wood and secrets, planning to restore it, maybe get some peace. Instead, I got her. "You can't stay here," she shouted. "This property belongs to the Lakeside HOA." I leaned on the railing, coffee in hand. "Really? Because the deed in my name says otherwise." Her lips tightened, like she'd practiced that glare in the mirror. "That deed is invalid. The HOA manages everything around this lake. We've got rules, and no one moves in without approval." She said approval like she was the governor. Behind her, two men in neon vests hovered awkwardly, probably HOA volunteers waiting for orders. I didn't say anything. I just turned and pointed to the rusty sign half buried in the grass. "See that? Private property, established 1923. My great-grandfather built this lake house long before your HOA existed." That made her blink, just once. Then she puffed herself back up. "Oh, please, we'll see about that. My husband's on the board. You'll be receiving an eviction notice by Monday." She stormed off, heels clicking against the old dock. The volunteers followed, whispering. I watched her leave, a bad feeling settling in my chest. Something told me this wasn't just a noise complaint. This woman wanted a war. That night, when I went through the basement boxes left by the previous owner, I found something that made my heart stop. An old map. The lake boundaries, hand-drawn and dated 1923. The line marking my property didn't just include the lake house. It stretched deep into what was now the HOA's fancy neighborhood. I stared at the map, realizing what it meant. Half of their precious community land might actually be mine. And if Karen really tried to evict me, she was about to find out whose land she'd been living on. The next morning, I woke up to hammering sounds outside, and not from construction I'd approved. I stepped out and froze. Karen's people were planting a giant wooden sign right on my driveway. Notice of eviction, unauthorized occupancy of HOA property. I almost laughed. Unauthorized? I literally own this house. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, sunglasses gleaming like a villain in a bad soap opera. "Oh, we're past that argument," she said sweetly. "Our lawyers confirmed the HOA's boundaries. You've got 48 hours to vacate or will involve law enforcement." She smirked like she'd already won. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and calmly said, "So you're claiming legal ownership over this property?" She nodded proudly. "Exactly." "Good," I replied. "Then you won't mind if I show the sheriff this footage when I file a harassment report." Her smile faltered for the first time. Behind her, a few neighbors had gathered, whispering, phones out. She noticed the attention and snapped. "Everyone, disperse. HOA business doesn't concern outsiders." But the whispers didn't stop. People loved seeing her nervous. Later that afternoon, I drove into town with that old map rolled up in my passenger seat. The county clerk's office was dusty, half forgotten, like time had stopped there. The clerk, a quiet older man, adjusted his glasses as I spread the map on his counter. "Where'd you find this?" he asked. "In the basement of the original lake house." He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "This seal, that's the county's mark from 1923, pre-HOA. This document's legit." "So does it mean what I think it means?" I asked. He smiled slowly. "It means those HOA folks have been sitting on land that doesn't legally belong to them. Half their park, their clubhouse, even the entrance road, all built on your family's property." I felt a cold rush through me. Karen had just tried to evict me from my own land. I folded the map carefully and said, "Guess it's time the HOA learns where their precious lake really ends." That night, before I went to bed, I put up a small wooden sign of my own at the edge of their road. It read, "Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted." And when I turned around, I saw someone in the dark. A figure near the trees, watching me. Not Karen, not a neighbor, someone else. The next morning, the fog was thicker than usual, curling across the lake like smoke. I stepped out with my coffee and noticed something strange. The sign I'd put up last night was gone, completely vanished. Only the wooden post remained, snapped clean in half. I heard laughter near the dock. Karen stood there with 2 HOA men, holding my sign like a trophy. "Oh, look who's awake," she called out. "You think you can threaten a legally recognized association with a piece of wood?" I walked closer, calm but boiling inside. "You broke onto my land to remove my property. That's trespassing." She grinned. "Actually, it's community maintenance. You'll learn the rules soon enough, assuming you're still here after tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I asked. "Eviction day," she said, smiling wide. "I already spoke to law enforcement. They'll be here at 9 sharp." I didn't argue. I just let her leave, still waving my sign like she'd won something. But as soon as she was gone, I went back to the basement, pulled out my phone, and called the county clerk again. He picked up after a few rings. "Mr. Walker, I've been digging into those records you brought in yesterday," he said. "You're not gonna believe this. The HOA filed their foundation permits 50 years ago using a copied land survey. Someone forged boundaries to include your lake property." I felt my chest tighten. Forged? As in illegal? Exactly. And if you can prove it in person, you could reclaim every inch they stole, even their community hall. That was all I needed to hear. That evening, I loaded the map, the documents, and the old deed into my truck. I drove to the HOA's community meeting, Karen's pride and joy, the one she held every Friday night at their fancy glass clubhouse. As I parked outside, every pair of eyes turned to me. Karen froze mid-sentence at the microphone. "Oh, great," she muttered, voice dripping with sarcasm. "The trespasser has arrived." I stepped forward, dropped the rolled-up map on the table, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think you'll want to see this before you evict me tomorrow." Karen laughed, but her husband, a tall man in a suit, frowned. "What's this about?" I spread the map open under the fluorescent lights. The faded ink and county seal caught everyone's attention. "This," I said, "is the original survey of this entire lake, dated 1923. Everything from this clubhouse to your main road sits on my family's land." Silence. Then gasps. Karen tried to laugh it off, but her husband grabbed the map, studying it. His face drained of color. "Karen, this can't be right." "Oh, it's right," I said. "And tomorrow, when those cops show up, they won't be evicting me." I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the room. "They'll be evicting you." Karen's laughter cracked through the silence, sharp and desperate. "You think this little prop will scare anyone?" she said, pointing at the map. "You can't just walk in here and claim an entire neighborhood because of some old paper you found in your basement." But her voice trembled. The crowd noticed. I stayed calm. "That old paper is registered at the county archives. Your HOA has been sitting on my family's land for decades, and if you think I'm bluffing, call the sheriff right now." The room buzzed. A few board members whispered, exchanging uneasy glances. Karen's husband wiped sweat from his forehead. "Maybe we should—" "No," she snapped. "He's bluffing. I'll prove it." She stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard it rattled. The crowd dispersed, murmuring. Some avoided my eyes, but others gave small nods, the kind that said they were tired of her too. As I walked out to my truck, the night air felt heavy. Halfway down the gravel road, headlights appeared behind me, blinding, fast, too close. I pulled over, heart pounding. The car stopped right beside me. It was Karen. Her window rolled down, and her voice came out low, cold. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Walker," she said. "You think you can just destroy what we built here?" "What you built," I replied, "wasn't yours to begin with." Her nails tapped the steering wheel. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Then she smirked. Enjoy your last night in that rotten shack." She sped off, tires spitting gravel. When I got back to the lake house, the porch light was swinging. Someone had been there. My door was slightly open. I froze. Inside, drawers were pulled out, paper scattered. Someone had searched the place. The old map copies I'd made were gone. But they'd missed one thing: the metal box I'd hidden behind the fireplace bricks. I pulled it out, hands shaking, and opened it. Inside was something I hadn't noticed before: a smaller envelope, sealed and marked with my great-grandfather's handwriting. It read, "For whoever finds this, the truth lies beneath the dock." I looked toward the lake, where the fog was rolling in again, silent and thick. Whatever secret my great-grandfather buried there, it might just be what exposes everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lake looked different, still, dark, almost watching me. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the dock. The wood creaked under my boots, old and wet from years of neglect. At the edge, I knelt down and ran my hand over the planks. One of them sounded hollow. I pried it up with a crowbar, heart thudding. Inside the space beneath, there was a metal tube wrapped in oilcloth. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, black and white shots of men in suits, a surveyor's team marking boundaries around the lake. One of the men was my great-grandfather. The other was Karen's grandfather. And below the photos, an official document, a contract dated 1953. It stated that my great-grandfather had leased a portion of the land temporarily to a new lakeside association under one condition: that it would revert back to his family after 70 years. 70 years, which meant the lease expired this year. That was it. The HOA's entire claim to the land wasn't just wrong, it was expired. I took photos, sealed the originals back in the tube, and locked it in my truck. By morning, I'd be at the courthouse to file everything. But when dawn came, I wasn't the only one awake. Karen stood in my driveway with 2 police officers. "There he is," she shouted. "This man's trespassing on HOA property." The cops approached, serious but uncertain. "Sir, we got a call about a property dispute. Do you have any proof of ownership?" I smiled faintly. "I've got more than proof. I've got history." I handed them copies of the deed and the 1953 lease agreement. One of the officers whistled under his breath. "These look authentic." Karen's face went pale. "That can't be real. That's fake. He's lying." The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, if this checks out, the HOA's been occupying this property unlawfully for decades." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do this. I run this neighborhood." I looked her dead in the eyes. Not anymore. 2 days later, the courthouse hearing drew half the town. HOA members, neighbors, even local reporters. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Karen arrived in a bright red suit, makeup perfect, fake confidence dripping off her. She sat at the front, arms crossed like she owned the place. The judge reviewed the documents in silence for nearly 10 minutes. Then he looked up and said simply, "The lease clearly states the property rights revert to the Walker family in 2023. The HOA has no legal standing." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen shot to her feet. "You can't take our homes! You can't—" The judge cut her off. "Ma'am, you should be grateful Mr. Walker isn't pressing charges for trespassing, forgery, or harassment." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She sat down slowly, the fight draining out of her. When I walked out of the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. I didn't say much, just one line that went viral the next day. "You can't evict someone from land your own lies were built on." A week later, I stood by the lake again. The sun was setting, gold over the water. The HOA signs were gone, the fences removed. Their so-called community clubhouse, which turned out to be on my land, was now legally mine. Karen had moved out quietly a few days earlier. Rumor was her husband filed for separation after learning she'd faked part of the HOA's records. I wasn't looking for revenge, but sometimes justice just happens. As I fixed the dock, a neighbor walked over, an older man who used to avoid me before. "Glad you stood up to them," he said. "Nobody's had the guts to do it." I smiled. My great-grandfather built this lake house with his hands. I wasn't going to let anyone steal it. That night, I opened the letter I'd found in the metal box, the one I hadn't read yet. It was short, written in my great-grandfather's fading ink. "If you're reading this, it means the land has called for justice again. Remember, property isn't just soil and wood, it's legacy. Protect it with truth, not anger." I folded the letter and placed it on the mantel. Outside, the lake shimmered in the moonlight, calm for the first time in weeks. I could almost hear his voice in the wind. Karen had tried to erase history, but history had erased her instead. The courthouse steps were still buzzing when I walked out. Reporters shouted questions, microphones flashing in my face, but all I could think about was the silence that came after justice. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, just heavy. Karen stood across the street, staring at the papers in her hand like they were written in another language. Her husband tried to talk to her, but she shoved him away. "No, they can't take this from me," she yelled. "We built this neighborhood. I built this community." I walked past her quietly. She turned toward me, eyes burning. "You think you've won? You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stopped. "No, Karen," I said softly. "You did that yourself." For a second, she didn't have anything to say. Then her voice broke. "This was my father's legacy," she whispered. "The HOA was all I had left." Something in me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But legacies built on lies don't last long. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the old letter from my great-grandfather still on the mantel. I poured myself a cup of coffee and just listened to the wood crackle. The house felt alive again, not haunted, not broken, just home. Then, around midnight, headlights flashed outside. A car door slammed. I went to the window. Karen. She was standing in the rain, mascara running, clutching a folder. I opened the door. "You shouldn't be here," I said. She stepped forward, voice shaking. "You don't understand. They're going to arrest me." "What?" "The board. They said I falsified the permits, but it wasn't just me. It was the developer. He's been using HOA funds to cover it up for years. I have proof." She opened the folder. Bank transfers, fake surveys, signatures, all of it linked to someone named Gregory Haynes, the HOA's original founder's son. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because I thought you were the enemy," she said, tears mixing with rain. "But you were just defending what was yours. I was defending a lie." I looked at her, unsure whether to believe her or not. "You're saying the entire HOA was built on fraud?" "Yes," she whispered, "and if the county finds out, the whole place goes down." I stared at the papers, realizing this was bigger than just my land. This was decades of corruption buried under lakeside charm. Before I could speak, lightning cracked across the sky, and for the first time, I saw Karen not as a villain, but as someone finally drowning in her own truth. She looked up at me, voice trembling. "Help me fix it before it destroys everyone." And for the first time, I didn't see her as Karen. I just saw a woman scared to lose everything, including herself. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down in thick sheets, soaking the porch as we stood there. Two people who'd been at war, now bound by something darker than anger, truth. I led her inside. She sat near the fire, shivering, clutching that folder like it was her last lifeline. I poured her some coffee. For the first time, she didn't correct me, didn't lecture, didn't order. She just whispered, "Thank you." We went through the documents together. Fake survey maps, altered permits, and payments to county officers from years ago. Everything tied back to Gregory Haynes, the founder's son. Turns out, the HOA had been stealing land for decades, using intimidation and paperwork manipulation. My great-grandfather's property was just the first. Karen buried her face in her hands. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I was protecting him. I leaned back, thinking hard. If you go public with this, you'll lose everything, but you'll also stop him from ruining anyone else. She nodded slowly. I deserve to lose everything, but not the truth. By morning, we were both at the county office again. The same clerk blinked in surprise seeing Karen walk in beside me. "Didn't expect to see you two together," he said, half joking. "Things change," I replied. We handed him the folder. He skimmed through it, eyes widening. This is bad. These records prove the HOA was illegally extended over private property. And this man, Haynes, he signed documents under multiple fake shell companies. It's criminal fraud. Karen's voice cracked. "What happens now?" The clerk sighed. "If the county prosecutes, every resident could be entitled to property refunds. The HOA's assets will be frozen, and whoever ran this might go to prison." Karen stared at the floor. "Then it's time." Within a week, it was all over the local news. OHA corruption scandal, decades of forged land records exposed. Karen's name was mentioned, but not as the villain anymore. Reporters called her the whistleblower who came clean. When she came to my lake house again, she wasn't wearing heels or pearls this time, just jeans, a tired smile, and relief in her eyes. "I sold my house," she said quietly, moving away for a while. "You did the right thing," I told her. She nodded. "I just wish I hadn't waited so long to see what was real." Before leaving, she paused by the door. "For what it's worth, your great-grandfather built more than a lake house. He built something no one could steal. Truth." And then she was gone. I watched her car disappear down the road, the same road she once claimed belonged to her HOA. Funny how things come full circle. That evening, as the sun sank behind the lake, the water reflected orange and gold, peaceful, still, whole again. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was defending land. I felt like I was protecting a legacy that had finally found justice. The following weeks felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long storm finally ends. The county crews came and tore down the last of the HOA's fences, removing every private community sign that didn't belong. Bit by bit, the lake looked the way it was meant to, open, free, untouched by greed. I spent most mornings on the porch, sanding the old railings, fixing the broken steps. Each sound of the hammer felt like stitching history back together. Across the water, kids were laughing again, not worried about permits or rules, just being kids. One afternoon, the mailman brought a letter. Thick envelope, official seal. I opened it, expecting another bill, but it was something else. A court notice stating that the land titles were officially restored to the Walker family, my family. For the first time in 70 years, the lake house was legally and permanently mine again. I smiled and looked toward the dock, the same place I'd found my great-grandfather's message. The wood was new now, rebuilt, but I kept one plank old, the one I'd pried open that night. A reminder. Later that evening, I walked down there, watching the sunset spread across the lake. A breeze rippled the water, and for a second, I swore I heard his voice again. My great-grandfather's words from that old letter. Protect it with truth, not anger. That's when I realized this wasn't just about land. It was about the kind of fight every generation faces, the fight to stand your ground without losing your soul. Karen never came back to the lake, but she sent a postcard once. No return address, just a line written in neat cursive. Thank you for reminding me what real ownership means, not land, but honesty. I kept it pinned above the fireplace. A year later, the lake house looked brand new. Tourists came by sometimes, taking pictures of the century-old property that survived the HOA scandal. I didn't mind. I even put up a small sign near the dock that read, Walker Lake, established 1923, still standing. As I watched the water glisten under the fading sun, I realized something important. Justice doesn't always roar like thunder. Sometimes it just settles quietly, like the evening light on a lake that finally belongs to the right hands again. And as the sky turned gold, I said softly to myself, I didn't win this land back for revenge. I want it back to keep a promise. Then I smiled, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, the lake answered back. Calm, clear, free. They tried to evict me from my own land, but in the end, truth evicted them all.